Commander Zekthor stood at the observation deck of Coalition Station Apex, his four eyes scanning the depths of space with practiced efficiency. The war against the Vrek swarm had consumed 3 generations of his people, the Calaxians and countless others across the galaxy. He had served for 15 years, rising through the ranks with careful precision and calculated decisions. Every battle, every strategy, every loss had been measured and weighed against projected outcomes. That was the Calaxian way. That was the Coalition way. The alert came through his communicator with a gentle pulse. A new species had arrived at the station. Humans, they were called, from a distant world named Earth. Zekthor had read the initial reports with growing concern. These humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 20 years ago. They were primitive by galactic standards, barely worthy of notice. Yet they had volunteered to join the war effort, claiming they could help turn the tide against the Vrek. Zekthor found the idea almost insulting. The Coalition had been fighting this war with the combined might of 47 advanced species. They had weapons that could crack planets, shields that could withstand supernovas, and strategic computers that could calculate battle outcomes with 98% accuracy. What could these newcomers possibly offer? His assignment was simple: evaluate their combat capabilities. Determine if they were worth the resources it would take to train and integrate them. File a report. The entire process should take no more than a week. Then he could return to his real duties on the front lines. The human delegation arrived in the main hangar with minimal ceremony. Zekthor watched from the upper gallery as their ship docked. It was a crude vessel by Coalition standards, held together with welds and patches that suggested frequent repairs. The design was functional but inelegant, lacking the flowing lines of Calaxian craft or the geometric precision of Vorian engineering. The airlock opened, and the humans emerged. Zekthor counted 12 of them, dressed in mismatched uniforms that seemed to reflect individual preference rather than proper military standardization. Some wore jackets covered in patches and insignia. Others had rolled up their sleeves despite being in a formal military setting. One was even chewing something, his jaw working in a casual rhythm that spoke of complete unconcern. The leader stepped forward. He was tall by human standards, with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His uniform was slightly more formal than the others, but he wore it with the same casual air. When he smiled up at the observation gallery, Zekthor felt his secondary eyelids flicker with confusion. This was a military officer arriving at a wartime command station. Why was he smiling? Zekthor made his way down to the hangar floor. Protocol demanded a formal greeting, and despite his doubts, he would fulfill his duty. As he approached, the human leader extended his hand in what the briefing documents had described as a handshake. Zekthor carefully touched his 3-fingered hand to the human's 5-fingered one. "Commander Zekthor, I presume," the human said. His voice was warm, almost friendly. "Captain Jake Morrison, Earth Space Forces. This is my second-in-command, Lieutenant Amy Phillips." A female human stepped forward. She had dark hair pulled back in a tight arrangement and eyes that reminded Zekthor of a hunting bird. Unlike Morrison, she did not smile, but there was something in her posture that suggested coiled energy, like a spring compressed and ready to release. "We're glad to be here," Morrison continued. "We've heard a lot about the Coalition's fight against the Vreks. We're ready to help however we can." Zekthor studied them carefully. "Your enthusiasm is noted, Captain. However, you must understand that the Vrek swarm is unlike any threat your species has likely encountered. They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They consume everything in their path. The Coalition has been fighting them for 73 years with limited success." "Sounds like you could use some fresh ideas," Morrison said. The comment bordered on insubordination, though technically Morrison was not yet under Coalition command. Zekthor decided to overlook it. "Perhaps. First, you will undergo evaluation. Your combat capabilities, tactical knowledge, and equipment will be assessed. Based on those results, we will determine how best to utilize your forces." "Fair enough," Morrison agreed. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow. For now, my staff will show you to your quarters. Rest and prepare yourselves." As the humans were led away, Zekthor noticed they were talking and laughing among themselves. One slapped another on the back. Someone made a joke that caused several others to laugh loudly. Their casual attitude puzzled him. Did they not understand the gravity of the situation? Did they not realize that most species who joined the coalition effort suffered casualty rates between 30 and 50% in the first year? The evaluations began the following morning in the Tactical Simulation Center. Zekthor had prepared a series of scenarios based on actual battles against the Vrex. The goal was to see how the humans would respond to standard combat situations. The first scenario was straightforward: a small coalition patrol encountering a Vrex scout group. Standard protocol called for engagement at maximum range, calculated fire to destroy the enemy with minimal risk, and immediate withdrawal if the engagement turned unfavorable. Zekthor watched from the control room as Morrison and his team took their positions in the simulation pods. The scenario began. The Vrex appeared on sensors. Morrison immediately ordered his ships forward at full speed, closing the distance rather than maintaining it. Zekthor's mandibles clicked with confusion. What was he doing? The simulated battle was brief and brutal. Morrison's ships took heavy damage but destroyed the Vrex completely. When the simulation ended, Morrison emerged from his pod looking satisfied. Interesting, he said. The Vrex use swarm tactics. They're most effective at close range where they can overwhelm you with numbers. But they're not expecting someone to charge straight at them. Your casualties were 40%, Zekthor pointed out. That is unacceptable. But we won, Morrison replied. And we prevented the Vrex from reporting back to their main force. Isn't that worth something? Winning at such cost is inefficient. Coalition doctrine requires preservation of forces for sustained campaigns. Morrison shrugged. Different philosophy, I guess. We're taught that some fights are worth any cost. The next scenario was more complex. A coalition supply convoy under attack, with Vrex forces approaching from multiple vectors. The proper response was to assess the convoy's value, calculate the probability of successful defense, and make a logical decision about whether to engage or allow the convoy to be sacrificed while preserving military assets for more critical battles. Zekthor had selected this scenario specifically because it had no good solution. The convoy's value was marginal. The attacking Vrex force was substantial. Any logical calculation would result in the decision to withdraw and save the military ships for another day. Morrison did not withdraw. Instead, he split his forces, using half to draw the Vrex away while the other half escorted the convoy to safety. The maneuver was tactically unsound and resulted in the complete destruction of his diversionary force. But the convoy survived. Unacceptable, Zekthor said when the simulation ended. You sacrificed half your fleet for a low-value target. Low value? Amy Phillips spoke up for the first time. Those were supply ships carrying food and medicine to a civilian colony. How is that low value? In terms of military priority, civilian supplies are rated below combat vessels and strategic resources. That's insane, Phillips said flatly. What are we fighting for if not to protect civilians? Zekthor found himself without an immediate answer. The question seemed absurd. They were fighting to preserve the coalition, to maintain territorial integrity, to prevent the Vrex from expanding further. The protection of civilians was a natural consequence of military success, but it was not the primary objective. We fight to win the war, he finally said. Individual civilian populations are unfortunate casualties of a larger struggle. The look Morrison and Phillips exchanged spoke volumes. There was something in their expressions that Zekthor could not quite identify. Disappointment, perhaps? Or was it pity? The evaluations continued for 3 more days. Each scenario revealed the same pattern. The humans made tactically questionable decisions that prioritized immediate action over long-term calculation. They took risks that no coalition officer would consider. They seemed willing to sacrifice themselves for objectives that the strategic computers rated as low priority. On the final day, Zekthor met with Morrison to discuss the results. They sat in a small conference room, the tactical displays showing casualty projections and efficiency ratings. All of them reflected poorly on the human approach to warfare. Captain Morrison, I must be honest with you. Your performance in these evaluations has been concerning. Your tactics result in excessive casualties. Your decision-making appears to be driven by emotion rather than logic, and your disregard for standard protocol suggests a lack of proper military discipline. Morrison leaned back in his chair, that strange smile returning to his face. Commander, can I ask you something? Of course. How's the war going? From the Coalition's perspective, I mean. Coalition Command did not appreciate Zekthor's report. 3 days after he submitted it, he received new orders. Rather than returning to his regular combat assignment, he was to continue working with the human forces. His task was to observe their training exercises and provide ongoing assessment of their readiness. The unspoken message was clear: find a way to make this work. Zekthor reported to the human training facility with reluctance. It was located in the lower sections of the station, repurposed from an old cargo bay. The humans had wasted no time in making it their own. Equipment was scattered around in what seemed like random arrangement. Music played from speakers mounted on the walls. Several humans were engaged in physical exercise routines that appeared designed to cause injury rather than maintain fitness. Morrison greeted him with his usual smile. "Commander, good to see you again. We're just starting today's training scenarios. You're welcome to watch or participate if you'd like." "I will observe," Zekthor said stiffly. The first exercise involved what the humans called a breach and clear operation. A simulated enemy stronghold had to be entered and secured. Zekthor watched as Morrison divided his team into groups of 4. They moved through the simulation with practiced coordination, each member covering specific angles, communicating with brief hand signals and short verbal cues. What struck Zekthor was the speed. Coalition breach procedures emphasized caution and systematic clearing of each space. The humans moved like water flowing through cracks, fast and relentless. They took rooms in seconds that would take a coalition team minutes to secure. But the casualty rate in the simulation was horrifying. Nearly 30%. When the exercise ended, Zekthor approached Morrison. "Your speed is impressive, but you lost a third of your team, did we?" Morrison pulled up the simulation data. "It looks like they're marked as wounded, not killed. In a real situation, we'd have medics pulling them back to cover. They'd be back in action within hours, maybe minutes. The distinction is negligible. A wounded soldier cannot fight. Not immediately, no, but they can fight again. That's the point." Morrison gestured to one of his team members, a stocky man with a shaved head. "Commander, this is Sergeant Danny Cole. He's our close-quarters combat specialist." Danny nodded in greeting. "Commander, Morrison tells me you've got concerns about our tactics. Your methods accept unnecessary casualties," Zekthor said. "Maybe," Danny agreed. "But let me ask you something. In your breach procedures, how long does it take to secure a facility like the one we just simulated?" Zekthor calculated quickly. "Approximately 43 minutes with a projected casualty rate of 8%. And in that 43 minutes, what's happening to any prisoners or hostages inside?" The question caught Zekthor off guard. "Prisoners?" "Yeah, people being held by the enemy. Civilians, captured soldiers, whoever. What happens to them in those 43 minutes? Zekthor had never considered the question. Coalition doctrine did not account for hostage situations. The Vreks did not take prisoners. They consumed everything. The concept of rescuing captives was not part of standard tactical planning. "The Vreks do not take prisoners," he said finally. Danny's expression hardened. "But other enemies do. And 43 minutes is a long time for someone to be in enemy hands. We train to go fast because every second counts. Yeah, we might take more hits, but we get to the people who need help while there's still time to help them." Amy Phillips joined them, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Commander, we've uploaded the next training scenario. This one might interest you. It's based on a real situation from Earth history. The scenario loaded into the simulation system." Zekthor read the parameters and felt his mandibles click with confusion. A small unit of soldiers was surrounded by enemy forces. No reinforcements were available. Extraction was impossible. The logical action was to order the unit to inflict maximum casualties before their inevitable defeat. Instead, the scenario's objective was simply labeled, "Hold position." "I do not understand," Zekthor said. "What is the strategic purpose of this exercise?" "Sometimes you have to hold a position no matter what," Phillips explained. "Maybe you're buying time for civilians to evacuate. Maybe you're preventing the enemy from taking a critical resource. Maybe you're just showing them that they can't push you around without a fight. The why doesn't always matter. What matters is that when you're told to hold, you hold. Until you are killed, if that's what it takes." Zekthor watched as the humans ran through the scenario. They set up defensive positions, rationed their ammunition, and prepared fighting positions with overlapping fields of fire. The simulated enemy came in waves. The humans held, and kept holding, Even when their simulated ammunition ran low, they switched to hand-to-hand combat. Even when half the team was marked as casualties, the rest continued fighting. The scenario finally ended when the defensive position was completely overrun. Every single human soldier was marked as killed or critically wounded. They had held for 2 hours and 17 minutes against a force 10 times their size. "This is madness," Zekthor said when the simulation ended. "You achieved nothing except your own destruction." Morrison pulled up additional scenario data. "Actually, we bought enough time for the civilian evacuation to complete. 3,000 lives saved, and we destroyed so much enemy equipment that their advance was delayed by 6 days. I'd say that's something, but your entire unit was lost." "Yeah," Morrison said quietly. "Sometimes that's the price. But those 3,000 civilians got to live. Their children got to grow up. That's worth the price." Over the following days, Zekthor continued observing human training. Each exercise revealed the same disturbing pattern. The humans practiced scenarios that prioritized mission success over personal survival. They drilled rescue operations that required soldiers to expose themselves to enemy fire. They rehearsed evacuation procedures where the last person out was always the senior officer, contrary to all coalition doctrine that emphasized preserving command structure. One evening, Zekthor found himself in the human commissary, sharing a meal with Danny Cole. The food was strange but not unpleasant. Humans apparently required more variety in their diet than most species, and they had strong opinions about how it should be prepared. "Can I ask you something, Commander?" Danny said between bites. "Of course. What do you think about when you're in combat? Like, what goes through your head?" Zekthor considered the question. "I think about the tactical situation. Enemy positions, friendly positions, ammunition status, casualty projections. I calculate the optimal course of action and execute it." Danny nodded slowly. "That makes sense, logical. What do you think about?" "My team," Danny said simply. "The people I'm fighting with. Making sure they get home. Making sure that if something goes wrong, it happens to me and not them. That is irrational. Your survival is as important as theirs. Maybe, but I'm responsible for them. That's what leadership means to us. You take care of your people first. Everything else is secondary. Even the mission matters. Don't get me wrong. But my people matter more always." Zekthor found himself without a response. The Calaxian concept of leadership involved strategic oversight and optimal resource allocation. The idea that a leader would prioritize individual subordinates over mission success was foreign to him. A few days later, Zekthor received notice that the humans were conducting a full-scale training exercise. It would simulate a combat patrol mission through a disputed sector. Multiple coalition species would participate, giving the humans a chance to practice working with non-human allies. The exercise was scheduled to last 12 hours. Zekthor's unit was assigned to accompany Morrison's team aboard the human ship ESS Valiant. As Zekthor boarded, he noted the ship's interior was as chaotic as the training facility had been. Personal items were visible in crew quarters. The walls were decorated with pictures and mementos. One corridor had writing on it, names and dates marking some sort of human tradition. Morrison met him on the bridge. "Welcome aboard, Commander. We'll be departing in 20 minutes. You're welcome to observe from here or move around the ship as you like. I will remain on the bridge." As the ship prepared for departure, Zekthor noticed the crew's behavior. They chatted casually while checking systems. Someone made a joke that caused the navigation officer to laugh. Music played softly in the background. It was nothing like the quiet, focused atmosphere of a Calaxian vessel. "Do your crew not take this seriously?" Zekthor asked. Morrison looked around the bridge with obvious affection. "Oh, they take it very seriously. But we've also learned that if you're going to spend your life in danger, you might as well enjoy the time between the dangerous parts. Keeps everyone sane." The exercise began smoothly. The small fleet of human and coalition ships moved through the simulated patrol route, scanning for enemy contacts. Hours passed with nothing of note occurring. Some of Zekthor's initial tension eased. Perhaps this would be a simple exercise after all. Then the sensors registered something unusual. Long-range detection showed Vrex movement in an adjacent sector. According to the exercise parameters, this was unexpected. The Vrex were not supposed to be in this area. The ESS Valiant accelerated hard, pushing its engines beyond rated capacity. Around Zekthor, the human crew moved with practiced efficiency. The casual atmosphere had completely disappeared, replaced by focused intensity. But there was something else too, something Zekthor could not quite identify. The humans seemed almost eager. Weapon status, Morrison called out. All systems green. Ammunition at full capacity. Point defense systems online. Engineering, how long can we maintain this burn? 38 minutes before we risk core damage, came the response from below decks. But I can give you 42 if you really need it. 40 should do it. Phillips, status on the other patrol ships? Amy Phillips checked her console. The Calaxian destroyer Steadfast is matching our course. Commander Zekthor's ship. The others are requesting orders from Coalition Command. Morrison glanced at Zekthor. Your captain is following us? My captain follows my orders, Zekthor said quietly. And I am on this ship. It was not entirely true. Zekthor had sent no orders to his ship. But Captain Vexna was his oldest friend, and she knew him well enough to understand what he would want. The fact that she was risking her career along with his should have filled him with gratitude. Instead, it filled him with dread. They were heading toward certain disaster. The force ratio was impossible. Even with 2 ships instead of 1, they were hopelessly outnumbered. Every tactical calculation screamed that this was suicide. Yet Morrison stood on his bridge looking calm, almost peaceful. How could he be so serene in the face of certain death? Contact with the civilian convoy, Phillips announced. They report Vrek signatures on their sensors. They're attempting evasive maneuvers, but they're too slow. The transport ships aren't built for speed. Time to intercept? 14 minutes. The Vreks will reach the convoy in 23 minutes. Then we have 9 minutes to set up our defense. Danny, get your Marines ready. We might need boarding teams. Danny Cole's voice came through from the deck below. Marines are suited up and ready, Captain. Just point us at the bad guys. Zekthor watched the tactical display update. The Vrek's force was massive. At least 30 combat vessels ranging from small fighters to heavy cruisers. The convoy had 6 transport ships and 2 escort frigates. Against such overwhelming force, the escorts would last minutes at best. Captain Morrison, I must advise you one final time. This is not a winnable engagement. We should contact Coalition Command and request a full battle group response. No time, Morrison said. Besides, we're not trying to win. We're just trying to hold long enough for those people to escape. Hold? Against 30 ships? We've held against worse odds in the simulations. Those were simulations. This is real. Morrison finally looked at him, and Zekthor saw something in the human's eyes that made his blood run cold. There was no fear there, no doubt. Only absolute commitment. I know it's real, Commander. That's why we have to do this, because real people will die if we don't. The minutes ticked away. The Valiant and the Steadfast closed on the convoy's position. Behind them, 3 more patrol ships had broken formation to follow. Not enough to change the outcome, but enough to show that Morrison's decision was spreading like an infection through the patrol fleet. Approaching convoy position now, the helm officer announced. Vrek's force will enter weapon range in 4 minutes. Morrison stood and began issuing orders with calm precision. Valiant will take point position. Steadfast, I need you on our starboard. Convoy escorts, maintain your formation around the transports. Everyone else spread out and prepare to engage at maximum range. The goal is to draw fire away from the transports. Make yourselves tempting targets. Sir, making ourselves tempting targets generally results in us getting hit. Someone pointed out. Yeah, that's the idea. We take the hit so they don't have to. Zekthor's communicator pulsed. Captain Vexna was calling from the Steadfast. He accepted the connection. Zekthor, are you well? This is not like you. I am well, old friend. And you are correct. This is not like me. Perhaps that is the problem. What does that mean? It means I have been calculating battles for 15 years. And in those 15 years we have won nothing. The humans do not calculate, they simply act. Perhaps it is time to see what happens when we stop thinking and start doing. That sounds dangerously close to the philosophy that gets soldiers killed. Yes, Zekthor agreed. It does. The Vreks appeared on sensors. 32 ships, not 30. The count had been low. They came in the typical swarm formation, a chaotic mass that would overwhelm defenders through sheer numbers. Against a proper coalition battle line, they would still be dangerous. Against 6 ships and some convoy escorts, they should be unstoppable. All ships, weapons free, Morrison ordered. Engage at will. Make every shot count, the Valiant opened fire first. Its main cannon spoke with deep thrumming power, sending rounds downrange at relativistic speeds. The Vrex shields absorbed most of the impacts, but some got through. One Vrex fighter exploded in a brief flash of light. Then the return fire began. The Vrex did not have sophisticated weapons. They relied on mass drivers and energy weapons that were crude but effective. What they lacked in precision they made up for in volume, the space around the Valiant filled with incoming fire. Evasive maneuvers, Morrison ordered. Point defense. Prioritize incoming fire near the convoy. The ship twisted and turned, engines screaming as it tried to avoid the worst of the barrage. Impacts rang through the hull like hammer blows. Damage reports began streaming in. Hull breach on Deck 4, sealing emergency bulkheads. Portside shield generator at 40%. Direct hit on our secondary weapons array. We've lost aft turrets 3 and 4. Through it all, Morrison stood calm. He watched the tactical display, called out targets, adjusted their position to stay between the Vrex and the convoy. It was insane. It was suicide, and it was the bravest thing Zekthor had ever witnessed. The Steadfast fought alongside them, trading fire with Vrex cruisers that outmassed it 3-1. The other patrol ships darted in and out, trying to draw off pursuers, but there were simply too many Vrex. For every enemy ship they destroyed, 2 more took its place. Convoy is moving to jump point, Phillips reported. Her voice was steady despite the chaos. They need 3 more minutes to charge their drives. We can give them 3 minutes, Morrison said. Helm, bring us about. I want our broadside to face the main Vrex formation. Sir, that will expose our damaged portside. I know. To it anyway. The Valiant turned, presenting its full weapons array to the enemy. Every gun that could fire opened up at once. The barrage was impressive, tearing through Vrex shields and armor. But it also made the Valiant a stationary target. The Vrex pounced. Multiple heavy hits struck in rapid succession. The ship bucked and shuddered. Lights flickered. Emergency alarms wailed. Zekthor gripped his chair, feeling something he had not felt in years of combat. Genuine terror. Shield generators offline, someone shouted. We're naked out here. Hull breaches on decks 3, 5, and 7. Fire suppression systems failing on deck 6. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. Keep firing. We're not done yet. A massive explosion shook the ship. Zekthor was thrown from his chair, landing hard on the deck. When he looked up, he saw that one of the main view screens had shattered. Smoke poured from damaged consoles. Half the bridge crew was down. Morrison pulled himself back to his feet, blood running from a cut on his forehead. Status report. Main reactor is critical, engineering reported. We have maybe 2 minutes before containment fails. 2 minutes is all we need. Convoy status? Phillips was slumped over her console. Amy Phillips, who had seemed so fierce and capable. She was not moving. Morrison rushed to her side, checking her pulse. After a moment, he sagged with relief. She's alive. Just unconscious. Someone get a medic up here. Danny Cole appeared on the bridge, his uniform scorched. Captain, we've lost the port side completely. Vrex are trying to board us, then stop them. Use whatever you need to. Yes, sir. Through the shattered viewport, Zekthor could see the Steadfast. Vexna's ship was burning, venting atmosphere from a dozen wounds, but it was still fighting, still firing, still holding its position between the Vrex and the convoy. Convoy is jumping, someone announced. They're away. All transports made it out. For a moment, there was silence on the bridge. They had done it. Against impossible odds, against every principle of sound tactics, they had saved the convoy. Every single civilian ship had escaped. Then Morrison spoke again, his voice surprisingly gentle. Good, now let's try to save ourselves. All ships disengage. Fall back to... He never finished the order. A Vrex dreadnought, massive and terrible, emerged from behind a disabled frigate. Its main weapon was already charging, a sickly green glow building at its bow. And it was pointed directly at the Steadfast. Zekthor's mind calculated trajectories and timing in an instant. The Steadfast had no shields. Its engines were damaged. It could not evade. Vexna and her crew had seconds to live. Then the Valiant moved. Somehow, despite its crippled state, Morrison's ship accelerated. It crossed the distance between itself and the Steadfast in moments, and it placed itself directly in the line of fire. Morrison, what are you doing? Zekthor screamed. The aftermath of the battle played out in sterile conference rooms far from the debris field where the Valiant had died. Zekthor stood before a coalition tribunal. 5 senior officers representing the major species of the Alliance. Their expressions ranged from disappointment to outright anger. Behind them, holographic displays showed casualty figures and damage assessments. The charges were clear. Unauthorized deviation from patrol route. Engagement of superior forces without command approval. Reckless endangerment of coalition assets. The list went on. Captain Morrison, Lieutenant Phillips, and Sergeant Cole stood beside Zekthor, also facing judgment. They were all out of uniform, wearing plain gray clothing provided by coalition security. Prisoners awaiting sentencing. The presiding officer, a Vorian admiral named Kethran, reviewed the reports with cold precision. Captain Morrison, you willfully disobeyed operational parameters and led a patrol force into a combat situation that resulted in the loss of 1 vessel, critical damage to 3 others, and casualties exceeding 60%. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Morrison stood straight, his injuries from the battle still visible. A bandage covered part of his head. His left arm was in a support sling, but his voice was steady. Admiral, we saved every single civilian on that convoy. Over 3,000 lives, including 200 Calaxian children, 78 Vorian elders, and refugees from a dozen other species. Yes, we lost the Valiant. Yes, people were hurt, but 3,000 people who would have died are alive because we acted. You acted in violation of direct orders, Kethran responded. Coalition military doctrine exists for sound tactical reasons. Individual officers cannot simply decide which orders to follow based on personal feelings. With respect, Admiral, if we had followed those orders, 3,000 people would be dead. Perhaps. Or perhaps reinforcements would have arrived in time. Or perhaps other strategic considerations would have made a different outcome preferable. You did not have the information or authority to make that determination. Amy Phillips spoke up, her voice sharp. So we should have just let them die? Just watched while the Vreks slaughtered civilians? What kind of military is that? The kind that wins wars through disciplined strategy rather than emotional reactions, Kethran said coldly. Lieutenant, your species has been part of this coalition for mere weeks. You do not have the experience or knowledge to question methods that have been refined over centuries. Those methods aren't working, Morrison said. You've been losing ground for 73 years. The tribunal chamber erupted. Several officers began shouting at once. Security personnel moved forward, hands on weapons. For a moment, Zekthor thought Morrison had finally pushed too far. Then a voice cut through the chaos. Enough. Everyone fell silent. Admiral Kethran turned to look at Zekthor, who had spoken. Commander Zekthor, you have remained silent through these proceedings. Do you have something to add? Zekthor felt his skin flush, the Calaxian equivalent of perspiration. Every eye in the chamber was on him. His career, his reputation, his entire future hung on what he said next. The smart thing would be to distance himself from the humans, to emphasize that he had advised against their course of action, to play the role of the responsible officer caught up in someone else's recklessness. But when he looked at Morrison, standing wounded but unbroken, he could not do it. He could not betray what he had seen, what he had felt. I served the Coalition for 15 years before I met these humans, Zekthor began. His voice was quiet but steady. In that time, I fought in 23 major engagements and countless minor skirmishes. I followed every protocol. I calculated every risk. I made every decision based on optimal tactical outcomes. I was a model coalition officer. He paused, gathering his thoughts. And in those 15 years, I was never afraid. Not truly. Oh, I felt concern when battles went poorly. I felt regret when casualties exceeded projections. But I was never genuinely afraid because I trusted in our systems. Our calculations told us what was acceptable and what was not. We had mathematics to protect us from the weight of our choices. Zekthor walked forward, approaching the tribunal. Then I watched Captain Morrison lead his people into what should have been certain death. Every calculation said they would fail. Every tactical model predicted their destruction. They went anyway, and they succeeded. Not because they were lucky or because the mathematics were wrong, but because they committed everything they had to a single purpose. They did not calculate acceptable losses. They did not weigh strategic value against tactical risk. They simply decided that 3,000 lives were worth saving, and they saved them. Admiral Kethran began to speak, but Zekthor continued. When I was on the Valiant as it died, I felt real fear for the first time in my career. Not fear of death, but fear of what my death would mean. Fear that I had wasted 15 years following protocols that prioritized preservation over purpose. Fear that I had been calculating when I should have been fighting. Fear that these humans would die thinking they were wrong, when in truth they showed me what I should have been doing all along. He turned to face the other tribunal members. The Coalition has been fighting the Vrex for 73 years. In that time, we have lost 17 systems and 90 billion lives. We call these losses acceptable because our calculations say that more aggressive tactics would result in higher casualties. But we never calculate the cost of slow defeat. We never add up all the lives lost while we preserve our forces for battles that never come. Zekthor pointed at Morrison. This human and his crew violated your orders. They endangered their ship. They took casualties that no Coalition officer would accept. And in doing so, they achieved something we have failed to do in 7 decades of calculated warfare. They won. The chamber was silent. Zekthor could see his career evaporating before his eyes. Everything he had built, every accomplishment, every honor would be stripped away for this moment of honesty. But strangely, he felt no regret. Only a sense of lightness, as if a great burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Admiral Kethron studied him for a long moment. Commander Zekthor, are you aware that your testimony constitutes an admission of shared responsibility for these violations? I am. And you stand by your statement? I do. The Admiral leaned back, his alien features unreadable. Captain Morrison, you stated that you saved 3,000 lives. The official count is 3,147. Do you know why that number is so precise? Morrison looked confused. No, sir, because we counted every single one. Every child, every elder, every refugee. We know their names. We know their species. We know which ships they were on and which cabins they occupied. Catherine pulled up a holographic display. We know, for example, that the transport ship Unity carried 73 Vorian civilians, including my sister and her family. They would have been the first to die when the Vrex attacked. The admission hung in the air. Morrison's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. I was prepared to condemn your actions today, Catherine continued. The evidence is clear. The violations are undeniable. But I find myself facing a difficult question. How do I condemn the person who saved my sister's life? Another tribunal member spoke up. A Calaxian general named Pelthar. My nephew was on the Steadfast. Commander Zekthor's friend Captain Vexna saved his life during the evacuation. The Steadfast would have been destroyed if the Valiant had not intercepted that dreadnought's fire. So I face the same question as Admiral Kethron. How do I condemn the humans who saved my nephew? One by one, the tribunal members revealed their connections to the saved convoy. A grandchild, a colleague, a former student. The seemingly random decision to engage had rippled outward, touching the lives of people across the Coalition. Finally, Catherine spoke again. Captain Morrison, your actions violated every protocol we have established. By all rights, you should be dishonorably discharged and barred from Coalition service. However, it appears that circumstances have complicated matters. He glanced at the other tribunal members, some sort of silent communication passing between them. The charges against you are dropped. All of them. Furthermore, you are hereby promoted to the rank of Major and assigned to command a new unit. This unit will have special authorization to operate outside standard tactical parameters when civilian lives are at immediate risk. Morrison looked stunned. Sir, I don't understand. Neither do I entirely, Catherine admitted. But Commander Zekthor is right about one thing. We have been losing this war through careful calculation. Perhaps it is time to try something different. He turned to Zekthor. Commander, you are also promoted to the rank of captain. You will serve as second in command of Major Morrison's unit. Admiral, I respectfully request a different assignment, Zekthor said. When everyone looked at him in surprise, he continued. I do not wish to be second in command. I wish to command my own vessel within this unit. The Calaxian destroyer Steadfast requires a new captain. Captain Vexna was injured during the battle and will need to recover. I would like to take her place. Catherine smiled, the first emotion he had shown during the proceedings. Granted. Captain Zekthor, the Steadfast is yours. Make us proud. The colony world of Haven's Edge appeared on the view screen like a dying ember. Smoke rose from burning settlements. Orbital debris from destroyed defensive platforms glittered in the light of the system's star. And everywhere, The distinctive energy signatures of Rex ships painted the tactical display in hostile red. Zekthor studied the situation from the bridge of the Steadfast. The numbers were not favorable. The Vrex had committed significant forces to this attack. 3 heavy cruisers, 7 destroyers, and countless smaller craft. Special Response Group 7 had only 12 ships, though they were the best crews in the coalition. Major Morrison is hailing all ships, his communications officer announced. Put him through. Morrison's face appeared on the screen. The human looked tired but determined. In the weeks since the tribunal, he had thrown himself into training the new unit with relentless energy. Captain Zekthor, what's your assessment? The Vrex have orbital superiority. They are systematically destroying population centers. Based on their current pattern, the colony has approximately 4 hours before all settlements are eliminated. 4 hours to evacuate 12,000 people, Amy Phillips said from Morrison's bridge. That's going to be tight. It would be impossible using standard coalition evacuation protocols, Zekthor agreed. Those protocols prioritize orderly processing and documentation. We do not have time for that. Then we do it the fast way, Morrison said. We go in hard, establish a defensive perimeter around the main spaceport, and load people as fast as we can. No paperwork, no waiting lines. Just get them on ships and get them out. Danny Cole's voice joined the conversation. Major, we're going to have company. That Vrex force is not going to just let us waltz in and take everyone. I know. That's why we're splitting into 2 groups. Group 1, led by the Steadfast, will engage the Vrex fleet. Draw them away from the planet. Group 2, my ships, will drop to the surface and begin evacuation. Once we have everyone loaded, Group 1 disengages and we all jump out together. It was a simple plan. Almost brutally simple. It relied on aggression, speed, and the willingness to take damage. No careful calculations, no measured responses, just commitment. Group 1 assignments, Morrison continued. Steadfast, the Calaxian cruiser Vigilant, the human destroyer Griffin, and the Vorian frigate Sunrise. 4 ships to hold off the entire Vrex fleet. Think you can do it, Captain Zekthor? Zekthor felt his skin flush with what he now recognized as anticipation, rather than stress. We will do more than hold them, Major. We will make them regret coming to this system. That's what I like to hear. All ships, you have your assignments. Execute in 5 minutes. And remember, we all go home together. No one left behind. The fleet split apart. 8 ships descended toward the planet, while 4 turned to face the Vrex force. Zekthor watched them go, then focused on his own mission. Holding off a superior force for 4 hours. It should be impossible. But then everything they had done in the past week should have been impossible. Helm, take us forward. Full combat speed. Weapons, charge all systems. I want every gun ready to fire. Engineering, prepare for heavy damage. We will be taking hits. His crew responded with practiced efficiency. They had trained together for years, but something had changed in recent weeks. There was an energy to their movements now, a purpose that went beyond simple duty. They had learned from the humans just as Zekthor had. The Vrex noticed the approaching ships. 3 destroyers broke formation to intercept. Good. Every ship focused on Group 1 was a ship not shooting at the colonists below. Target the lead destroyer, Zekthor ordered. All forward weapons, concentrated fire. Let us announce our presence, the steadfast guns spoke as one. The lead Vrex destroyer's shields flared under the impact, then buckled. Follow-up shots tore into its hull, ripping through armor. The ship began to tumble, atmosphere venting from multiple breaches. Target destroyed, weapons reported. Excellent. Next target. The battle became a furious dance. The 4 coalition ships moved in a coordinated pattern, supporting each other, covering vulnerable angles. They fought not to win, but to hold, to buy time. Every minute they kept the Vrex engaged was another minute for the evacuation below. The Vrex adapted quickly. They committed more ships to the engagement. 5 destroyers became 7, then 10. The coalition ships took damage but kept fighting. The Steadfast lost its forward shields. The Griffin suffered a hull breach. The Vigilant's main weapons array was disabled, but they held their position. On the planet below, Morrison's group worked frantically. The spaceport was chaos. Thousands of colonists, many injured or in shock, flooded toward the landing ships. There was no time for order, no time for organization. People were simply pushed aboard as fast as possible, packed into cargo holds and passenger compartments far beyond rated capacity. Zekthor monitored the evacuation progress on a secondary display while directing his ship's defensive fire. 3,000 evacuated, 5,000, 7,000. The numbers climbed steadily, but so did the pressure on Group 1. The Vrex were sending everything they had now. A heavy cruiser joined the assault, its massive guns tearing into the coalition formation. Steadfast taking heavy fire, his tactical officer reported. Hull integrity at 60%. Maintain position. We hold until Major Morrison gives the word. A communication request came through from the Vigilant. The Calaxian cruiser was heavily damaged, its captain requesting permission to fall back. Zekthor wanted to grant it. Every instinct from 15 years of service said to preserve the ship, minimize losses, calculate the acceptable threshold for sacrifice. But he had learned a different way. Vigilant, you hold that position. We all go home together, remember? No one retreats until everyone is safe. Understood, Captain. Vigilant will hold. The battle intensified. The Vrex cruiser focused its fire on the Griffin, recognizing it as the most damaged ship. The human destroyer twisted and turned trying to evade, but it was too slow, too hurt. A massive energy beam struck it amidships and the Griffin began to break apart. Griffin is evacuating, communications reported. They have launched all escape pods. Zekthor made a decision that would have horrified his younger self. Helm, intercept course. Position us between the Griffin and that cruiser. All power to rear shields. Captain, that will expose us to concentrated fire from multiple ships. I am aware. Do it. The Steadfast surged forward, placing itself in the line of fire. The Vrex cruiser's next shot struck the Steadfast shields instead of finishing off the Griffin. The shields held barely, then buckled, then failed. The following shots tore into the hull. Damage reports flooded in faster than they could be processed. Multiple hull breaches, systems failing across all decks, casualties mounting. But the Griffin's escape pods made it to the Sunrise, the Vorian frigate moving to collect them. The crew was saved. Major Morrison is hailing us, communications announced. Put him through. Morrison appeared on screen, his expression tight. Captain Zekthor, we've seen your damage reports. You need to fall back. How many evacuated? Zekthor asked, ignoring the suggestion. 10,000, but then we hold. 2,000 more to go. We can last 20 more minutes. Zekthor, your ship is coming apart. Then we will hold it together through force of will if necessary. Complete your mission, Major. We will be here when you are done. He cut the connection before Morrison could argue further. Around him, his bridge crew worked with desperate intensity. Every system was failing or already failed, but they compensated. When the main sensors went down, they used backup arrays. When the primary weapons stopped responding, they switched to secondary guns. When hull breaches threatened critical areas, damage control teams sealed them with their bodies if necessary. This was what the humans had taught him. Not recklessness, but commitment. Not a disregard for life, but an understanding of what life was worth. The Griffin's crew was alive because the Steadfast had taken their hits. The colonists below were still evacuating because Group 1 was still holding. The mathematics did not matter anymore. Only the mission mattered. Vexna appeared on an internal channel from where she was visiting the Steadfast's medical bay, helping with the wounded despite her own injuries. Zekthor, this is madness. We cannot hold much longer. We do not need to hold much longer. Only 20 more minutes. Can you give me 20 minutes, old friend? She smiled, a pained expression on her Calaxian features. For you? I can give you forever if needed. The Vrex cruiser lined up for another shot. Its main weapon charged that sickly green glow building. This would be the killing blow. The Steadfast could not withstand another hit like that. Zekthor prepared himself for death, finding that he felt no regret. Only satisfaction that he had finally learned what it meant to truly fight. Then a new ship appeared on sensors. Not from the planet or from Group 1, from the jump point, a single vessel moving at incredible speed. It was human design, smaller than a destroyer but faster, and it was heading straight for the Vrex cruiser. Identify that ship, Zekthor ordered. It's the ESS Defiant, sir. Captain Kelly Lee commanding. She's transmitting a message. Heard you could use some help. Hold on, we're coming. The Defiant struck the Vrex cruiser Lee.